Hi everybody, welcome to Busy Waiting. Today we're gonna take a look at how to install and set up Docker Community Edition on Ubuntu. I'll go through the same process for CentOS in a future episode, so hit the like and subscribe button if you don't want to miss that. This video will provide you with everything you need to know about installing Docker. I will guide you through the installation process steps and explain to you why you need to do some configuration steps so that you don't get permission errors. Now, before we begin, let's take a look at what we are actually installing. You have the Docker engine component, which does all the container creation, deletion, image, volume management. All in all, this is the component that handles all the heavy lifting of container operations. Now, the engine communicates with the rest of the world via a socket. This is located at /var/run/docker.sock, and it's kind of a file through which you can communicate with the Docker engine daemon, send it commands, get results back, and we'll look in more in depth to the API that is exposed via this socket in a later episode. The second component that we get via this installation process is the Docker CLI, or command line interface, which is basically a client that connects to the daemon through this socket. Every command that we run is handled by this component and forwarded through the socket to the Docker engine. Regardless of the distribution you are working with, the installation procedure has mainly 3 steps. Remove any previously installed older installations. Second, prepare the repositories from which you install the packages. And third, install the Docker engine and CLI client. If necessary, you need to enable the services, the Docker services, and configure the user groups so that you can run Docker commands. These steps are documented on docs.docker.com for each particular distribution, and for Ubuntu, you can, for instance, follow this link. So, let's do these steps and see what happens. First, let's remove the previously installed packages, well, if any. It is okay if you get some apt errors here, since you may not have these packages installed, or these packages might actually not exist for your distribution. Second, let's prepare now the Docker repositories and download the required keys. We now install some prerequisites to allow the package manager to use a repository over HTTPS. Then add Docker's official GPG key. And now you should verify that you have the key with the correct fingerprint. And now add the repository. At step 3, let's install the required packages. It may take some time, so I'll fast forward over this part. Now, it's important to see if Docker has been properly installed. The Docker engine runs as a service on the host and can be controlled via systemd commands. For instance, you can check the status with systemctl status docker service. And as you can see, the service is up and running and it is also enabled. Now, remember that socket I talked about in the beginning? That is also created by systemd, and we can check the status with systemctl. As you can see, this is also up and running. Let's take a look at the configuration file for this socket. It can be found at /lib/systemd/system/docker.socket. You can see here that the user owner of the socket is root, that it belongs to a group called Docker, and that the permissions for this socket have the octal value of 0660, which means that both owner and group have read and write permissions. Now, if I try to run a Docker command like docker version, I will get a permission-related error for my user. And why is that? This happens because my user is neither root nor does it belong to the group Docker. So what do I do if I want to be able to run Docker commands? Well, I have about 3 options. The first one is to run them as root, like sudo docker version or sudo docker container ls, right? The second one, which is the most used and it is also recommended by the Docker documentation, is to add your non-root user, in my case called user ID, to the Docker group. And this is done by using this command, usermod -a-G docker user ID. Remember that you need to log in again for the change to take effect. Now, let's run the commands again. For instance, docker version or docker container ls. And as you can see now, you have no error. The Docker daemon is responding to you. The third option, which is, well, more or less a hack, and I wouldn't recommend as it is less secure, is to change the Docker socket permissions configuration in the configuration file to the octal value of 0666. Basically, you'll have to update this field here and then do a systemctl daemon reload. This basically allows all users to read and write from your socket, and basically gives access to everybody to your Docker daemon, which I think security people may frown upon. That's it. Now you should be able to run the famous Hello World container to check that your installation is working properly. I hope you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe if you did, and see you in the next, where we take a look at the same installation process on CentOS.